fans, welcome back to Room 237, and let's talk about an 80s slasher film. If you follow my channel, you know I love my slasher films, especially from the 80s. It's one of my favorite genres, along with and eras, along with the Italian Giallo and like the Universal Monster era and the silent era. 80s slasher is one of my favorite genres and periods of horror history. And, you know, I reviewed a bunch. I reviewed close to 100 just from the 80s. And this is one that I think most people know the title, the cover art. Maybe not many have seen. Actually, for a while, it was pretty hard to find. Up until Code Red put it out. Oh, geez, over 15 years ago at this point. And it is one of the first slasher films after the big boom of like Friday the 13th from 1980. And it is Don't Go in the Woods. Or some people say Don't Go in the Woods Alone. I think that's just kind of like a tagline. I'm just going to call it Don't Go in the Woods. So not only is this 1980, which I think was the genesis year of the slasher boom. Of course, Halloween was 78. It had all the proto slashers in the 70s, but I think Halloween was the one that really kind of perfected the genre. And then Friday the 13th was the one that opened the floodgates. Even though you had a lot more Halloween ripoffs than you did Friday the 13th. But this is another camping woods slasher film. Which, yes, there is Friday the 13th, there is Sleepaway Camp, there is The Burning. I actually think it's closer to Just Before Dawn, which is one of my favorite slashers, a very underrated one. And actually, it's even closer to Madman. If you take Madman and Just Before Dawn, but with the gore and body count of a Friday the 13th film, you get Don't Go in the Woods. Film-wise, it's not as good as any of those, but I'll get into that. And this is a video nasty. This was one of the 33, I think it was, of the 72 that was actually seized and prosecuted. Which, of course, once you get past Last House on the Left, Spit on Your Grave, Cannibal Holocaust, and Cannibal Ferox, a lot of them are, why was this seized? There's barely any gore or violence in it at all. They just went with the cover art and the stills. This is one that when I watched it, I was like, okay, an actual bloody movie. Which, yeah, the kills are great. In fact, I mean, you have a body count. I've seen it vary, but between 13 and 15, and I mean, that's a body count that can rival even one of the higher Friday the 13th body counts. And if you've watched all my slasher, 80s slasher reviews, you know I've done a number of them where it's more so story to the last 10-15 minutes than all the kills are packed in. For a film that runs only 83 minutes, to have that many kills, I mean, it really is, like, every so often. So it sounds like I'm praising it, and well, before I get into that, if you are gonna get Don't Go in the Woods, I would say Code Red is the way to go, similar to Madman. I mean, you get a cool intro from Darren Miller of CKY, which of course he loves this film. You get like a 15-minute talk show appearance. You get an hour-long featurette of interviews. And you get a bonus commentary with Darren Miller, so that's cool. It says it's a director-supervised full screen, which there are some scenes that kind of make me think it should have been a widescreen, like when our four main characters are by a campfire. One's telling a story, and the one that is telling a story is like off camera. I don't know if that's just the way it was filmed, but now, yes, I am a fan of 80 slasher films. Yes, I am a fan of very low budget horror films or low-budget films in general. However, and yes, there are slasher films that do focus more on story and characters rather than kills, but still have kills. And then there are ones that focus more on kills and blood and gore rather than story and characters. But even those, there's still some kind of through line to get you through the film in between the kills. This is probably the least like a movie that I've seen as far as 80 slashers. Because there really is, I mean, there's less of a story than even some of the other plotless ones. I mean, even some of the most formulaic, basic Friday the 13th films have more of a plot than this. But before I get into any of that, it was produced and directed by James Bryan. I'm not sure what else he's done. Stars Nick McKellen, James P. Hayden, Mary Gaylarts, and Angie Brown. I think those are our four main characters. And Tom Drury as the monster. That's what he's credited as. That's what he looks like. Kind of like a more humanoid or more human version of Madman Mars, but still this backwoods, more like the brothers from Just Before Dawn. And really, what this movie is, I mean, yes, we have our four main characters, which, if there is a story, they're going on a hike through the woods to get to some cabin, and it's taking a little bit longer. That's it. And they don't even really start being stalked and killed until about the halfway point. But to tide us over till we get there, it's just non-stop kills of these unrelated, never before seen throwaway characters that really are the definition of slasher film body count fodder. And yes, the acting is terrible. The acting is not even entertainingly bad. The acting is awful. And in the worst cases, just grating on your nerves. Especially some of the characters like... Which actually, a lot of our characters don't even have names because they show up and die so quickly. We don't even know their names. But there are some characters like Dale, like Dick, and like Peter, which Peter's one of our four main characters. Dick and Dale are characters you will never forget their name because it's said so many fucking times. Dale is one of the first to go. I mean, we have a woman running through a creek in the very beginning who I think gets stabbed. Then you have a bird watcher or a photographer who gets killed. And then I think it's Dale and his wife. They look like stereotypical tourists with like the cameras and the hats. He hears a train and runs ahead to try to catch a picture of it. Excuse me. His wife is trailing behind, and literally for like a solid minute, we hear her annoying voice being like, Dale, 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 don't leave me here, Dale, Dale, come back, Dale, 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 don't leave me here, Dale, Dale, for like a full minute. And I can only speculate that her death, which is off screen, but we see her kind of like, it is kind of a cool shot, like between her legs on the ground with blood dripping down, with her kind of like huddled over, with her kind of like, I'm guessing to give us a shot where she's shut up, but then she's killed off screen. And yeah, in between all these kills, we get our four main characters walking, stopping to camp, walking, stopping to bullshit, telling a spooky story, walking, you know. It really does feel like the writers came up with a bunch of cool kill scenes for a woodsy slasher film and had like a compilation, but didn't write a story around it or any way to link them together. And I'm not saying a slasher movie needs that. I mean, slasher films are always fairly simple. Once in a while, you get lucky with like a Maniac or Alone in the Dark or A Nightmare on Elm Street, where the story is very good and so are the characters. But this almost does feel like a compilation of what happens if you go in the woods like you're not supposed to. So in a way, especially as far as all of the don't horror movies go, like Don't Answer the Phone, Don't Go in the Basement, I think there's one called Don't Look Out the Window, Don't Go in the Woods, Don't Go in the House. This one is probably the most appropriately titled. It shows us why you don't go in the woods alone. In fact, even of all our deaths, I think only technically 3 or 4 are actual people who are alone and by themselves. The rest of them are if someone is with someone, so it's not like they are alone. But it really does feel more like a compilation of kills in the woods than it does a slasher movie. Which, I mean, with a title like Don't Go in the Woods Alone, I forgive it. And I have always said, if your slasher isn't going to have very many or very interesting or cool kills, it better at least be interesting or entertaining. And if it's not interesting or entertaining, it better have enough kills. Or enough bloody and interesting kills. This one more than makes up for it. But it does fall under... It is... I myself found it entertaining. I was able to get through it because of the kills. If it had maybe half the amount of kills, this is one I would have full-on ranted on. And especially if they were pushed towards... Like, if it was just the 4 main characters, and it went on as it did, and then well into the second half when they start being stalked and killed, then I would have had a problem with it. It's still not wildly entertaining. There are some boring parts. I mean, like the woman on the cover, and again, this is a pretty famous poster, especially for slasher films. She is the painter scene, which she has her canvas, an easel set up. She has like her toddler daughter in one of her hanging bouncy things. But we see her go to a creek to fill a jar of water for her brushes, walk all the way to the creek, walk all the way back with just the sounds of nature, and it does take a while. There are a lot of padding scenes like that. Almost as if, okay, their kill scenes ate up this amount of time. All the scenes with our main characters took up about this much time. Oh crap, we still got this to fill up. So there is a lot of padding. The only real kind of story elements would be once our 4 main characters start being killed off, Peter, one of our leads, and Ingrid are able to escape. They're taken to a hospital, but their friend Jody or Joanne, whichever one her name is, they realize she left her. Or they left her behind, not knowing if she's alive or dead. When she made it to the monster's cabin, the killer's cabin, so they decide to break out of the hospital and go back for her. In which case they have, cops and hunters with them. We do occasionally cut back to the sheriff and his young deputy, which I think is supposed to be some sort of comic relief. Not to the extent of like Last House on the Left. So much so that they're not even really that funny. A lot of the humor I don't really see in it. I mean, there's one scene where Peter is freaked out by another hiker. Like he thinks it's Sasquatch or something. Hiker comes out, walks away. And they're walking up this steep hill, and both girls, like, it's like, Peter, catch up in the rear, or pick up in the rear, or whatever. Then they look at each other and laugh. And I'm like, was that supposed to be a joke? Other annoying characters, even though it's followed by one of my favorite shots in the whole film, is the newlywed couple in the camper van. Dick and Cherry, which is not only one of the most annoying couples I've seen in a slasher film, and I know I'm no prize myself, but one of the homeliest couples I've ever seen. I mean, she looks like Miss Gulch from Wizard of Oz. Well, they're making out, and she keeps being like, it's not perfect. My head's not right. Things aren't okay. I'm not ready. But she just keeps saying the guy's name, which is Dick, at like the beginning and ending of every sentence. And really cheesy beyond being funny and entertaining. Where he's like, oh, Cherry, the most beautiful thing to come into my life. Which is a cheesy line. But then she's like, oh, Dick. And it's just Dick. It's, oh, Dick. So yes, what he's supposed to be giving you, but you're having issues. And Dick just keeps repeating himself. Like she thinks she hears something out there, and he's like, I'll go take care of it. He says like 3 times, like, I'll go take care of it. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. And then when he goes to get his gun, he's like, I'll give you the keys, give me the keys, give me the keys, even though she's getting them. So like his death, which I like how that shot is from inside the van. It's just complete black darkness outside the windows. He like comes up and like smashes against the window with like bloody hands, bloody face. I think they put some sort of pale makeup on him to make him look more dead. And I don't know if like his head gets bashed or if he just spits blood all over the window. That's one of my favorite shots. And yeah, genuinely creepy, I guess. Because when you're out in the complete black woods and something comes up against your window, it's creepy. And then the van gets rolled down, set on fire, she dies. But yeah, she probably has the best death, the painter. Because, I mean, you know, stabbed up against her canvas, blood spattering all over it, which of course is an aesthetic I love. And then we see that her child is gone, assuming the killer took it. And there's other deaths, like Peter's down by a creek, and he's kind of remembering the 4 of them frolicking and splashing in the creek when this one fisherman guy comes by, steps on something, and this bear trap comes down, goes around his head, slow enough to get out of the way. But then that's when the killer comes down, and we get our first real good look at him. This really big, kind of chumly looking guy, big beard, wearing kind of like beads and pelts and, you know, like a mud smeared face. I do like his reaction when Peter screams and he's like, that's funny. And then another one of my favorite shots of the whole film, I do think this is actually well done. Peter's trying to run away, and he comes through this clearing in the woods. So it's like he's running, and like when it's like at this cool angle, and like when he catches up to the camera's like right along with him for a bit, then it's like behind him. I was like, okay, that's kind of a cool shot. And then you have like the midsection of the hospital. Then he gets Ingrid to go back with him to find Jody, who's killed. There is kind of a clever scene where it's like they're trying to set something up or do something other than just have our characters and have our victims. Where because the monster carries around this staff with trinkets and beads and stuff on it, so it uh, jingles and makes noise when he walks. This random hiker finds it, looks at it, then starts carrying it with him. Peter hears it, then he goes in for the attack and stabs, a random person. And yeah, eventually, they do catch up to the monster. They stab him about 60 times each with his spears. And then all the cops and hunters come up. They draw their weapons, but then they, put him away. And it ends with, because the monster always has this box with him, like this crate. But before he's killed, he drops it or sets it down. And we see that the box contained the toddler girl of the painter, who's sitting on the ground with like a hatchet hitting the ground, implying that she won't be found. She's going to raise herself in the woods and probably become the next, backwoods killer or whatever. And yes, the song during the end credits is another one of those earworm slasher folk songs. Not nearly as catchy as the Harry Warden ballad from My Bloody Valentine. It's actually kind of a silly sounding song, but it is catchy. Which the music is by H. Kingsley Thurber. I haven't talked about that because, well, no, because I just haven't, but the music is interesting. It is one of the more interesting and cool aspects other than the kills. Which, like, when the killer's around, think of like the opening drum beat of like Slow Ride. Just that. But like with a lot more distortion, and like a clankiness behind it. That's what we hear when the killer's there. It does kind of have like the Friday the 13th kind of like screech notes. It does have kind of a Friday the 13th-esque score, but a little bit more experimental. Like not necessarily notes or anything, but more so just kind of like sounds or sound effects. But it works for this film. And that's basically it. I mean, yeah, it's not terribly interesting. There's not really a thread to pull us through the whole movie. Is it a bad movie? Yes, it very much is. But for me personally, how much I love slasher films and just what little I ask of slasher films, because I know I'm not going to go into it thinking it's going to be some spectacular deep film, but there are ones that are literally nothing, like no plot, just core characters, a ton of unrelated characters that only show up to be killed. In fact, there's one scene which and this DVD is cleaned up pretty nice, because I've seen this clip from like the VHS and you can't see shit. It's a couple, they're in a tent. Like, we literally cut from our main characters to the outside of this tent. And I think the girlfriend says, like, Hey, where are you going? And then we just get shots from inside the sleeping bags with like knives and stuff. Like, literally get 2 seconds of this couple before they're just attacked. And that's really what makes it feel more like a compilation of Wood's death scenes than it does a camping slasher film. Which I would say, again, fits with the title. You you almost could have just Don't Go in the Woods does kind of sound like a compilation of death scenes in the woods. Like if they took all the death scenes from like the first, like say it came out in 83 or 84, the first 3 or 4 Friday the 13th, The Burning, Sleepaway Camp, Just Before Dawn, and put all the death scenes as like a compilation, it could be called Don't Go in the Woods. So, I mean, in a way, like the title fits. It shows us why you don't go in the woods. It's got a high enough body count, a big enough variety of kills. You know, I think almost everyone gets killed in more or less a different way. It's not a very gory film, but there's plenty of blood, plenty of bloodshed. I guess I could have forgiven the lack of story had the acting not been so piss poor, and most of the acting slash most of the characters not being so annoying. I mean, Dale's girlfriend, Cherry. I'll even say not so much the two main girls, but the one that gets left behind, she's kind of annoying. Not to the extent of Cherry and Dale's wife, but I'm kind of torn with this because I know people either, see it as just a movie that's supposed to have a high body count in the woods and be fun, supposed to be cheesy, supposed to just entertain, but does happen to have a lot of padding. But then other people just see it as 80s slasher cheese, no story, bad acting, lame kills, which I don't think they're lame. I don't love this movie, but I definitely can admit it's fun. I mean, there's plenty of kills to get you through the 83 minutes. I can laugh at most of the acting. Dale's wife and Cherry are the exception, but it does fit my requirements, which is if you have a low body count with not very interesting kills and they're all pushed towards the end, you better have a good enough story with good enough characters. Or if you don't have a story and good enough characters, you better have a high enough body count and or interesting kills. This one is certainly the latter. Is it the best woods camping slasher film? No, not by far. But it's still plenty entertaining. But I'm probably just going to end up repeating myself, so this is what I've wanted to get to for a while. I mean, I bought this back when I was collecting for my last Italian marathon because I finally found it. And I'm glad to finally get it out of the way because I've seen this a bunch of times. Like I said, the story is so non-existent that if I start to get tired but still want to make a video, I can just pop it in, and if I happen to fall asleep, no big deal. I've done that about a dozen times so far, so I'm glad to finally be done with this. So yeah, 1980s, Don't Go in the Woods, ... alone. Thank you for watching.